Alright guys, welcome back to my podcast channel, Nate. I know I haven't posted anything on my second YouTube channel lately. I rebranded my second YouTube channel to SparkerHat3940, so it's no longer Nate, but I'll still keep the Nate name as my little short thing. But, I know I haven't uploaded a bit on this thing, on this podcast channels because I don't really have any plans, but I'll start uploading as of today because today I'm gonna be starting the 100 best-selling albums podcast. So I hope you guys enjoy this video, of course. There is gonna be other segments. Today I'm gonna be starting off with the 50s. And I'm going to be starting off with the 50s only. So yeah, let's go ahead and just get straight into it. I'm sorry I'm not really loud. It's because my parents are downstairs, so I don't want to be like a little shouty, but my microphone's really good. So, you can necessarily say this is a podcast, but not because I'm necessarily talking to nobody. I'm just sitting here talking. But welcome to another podcast. I'm basically gonna be talking about the 100 best-selling albums. So this is my first music podcast, and I'm excited. I did have a live coming on my Nate YouTube channel, but I had to delete it last minute because it did not turn out great. So that had to be canceled. So, not only is this podcast channel going to be used for lives, but it's also going to be used for podcasts. I will share this to my Ninthrock at 5918 YouTube channel, so make sure to subscribe to my Ninthrock at 5918 YouTube channel too. I don't have nothing much to say. This channel desperately needs some subscribers. I might post this podcast on my Ninthrock at 5918 YouTube channel for a while, just to give you guys a head up. And I will post a trailer on my second YouTube channel. Then I'm going to start using this channel too, so I'm going to be swapping between the two. I'm still going to be uploading every day on my main YouTube channel, so make sure to subscribe to that. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get straight into the Sparker Hat 3940 podcast. Now let's redo my intro. Welcome back to Sparker Hat 3940. My name is Nate, and we are doing the 100 best-selling albums. So, yeah, now, let's face it, while we may not all admit it, everybody loves lists, and when it comes to music, lists featuring, or in many cases, not featuring one's favorite artists are a must-read. So, you must... I'm not forcing you guys to listen to the podcast, but if you guys want to, assisting each decade in this podcast lists the top 20 selling albums from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, which is pretty cool. For practical reasons, it was decided that a shorter list of the top 10 selling albums for the two of the decades would surface the 1950s. Since the LP only appeared in truly commercial form towards the end of the decade in the 2000s, since the current decade is only halfway through at time of writing. So it was the ranking for the albums. It's based on the number, I think, of platinum and multi-platinum certifications. I don't really know, but all I know is each album received from the Recording Industry Association of America, or RIAA, I think. I don't... Okay. In an industry not always noted for the accuracy of its published sales figures, these awards provide one of the most effective and reliable ways to measure sales. Successes, the figures represent minimum sales for each album. Each platinum award represents sales of at least 1 million units. But they do provide a consistent way to rate the relative position of each decade's best-selling albums. So at this point, you guys might figure that I'm going to be starting with the 1950s, which is going to be kind of challenging because I know you guys newer Gen Z people. I mean, of course, I'm Gen Z, but I listen to more older music than all this Gen Z. You guys listen to rap. But I will get modern in a podcast pretty soon, but I'm starting off with the 50s and 50s today only. And then next video would be in the 1960s. So yeah, it's these figures, they also have the advantage. So unlike similar lists based on chart position of showing album sales from the date, for example, there's Led Zeppelin remains one of the most influential debuts in rock, spending 79 weeks in the UK chart and 50 in the US, which I think is really insane. It is of the first release right up to present day. Compilation or greatest hits albums are not included in this list, although live albums and original soundtracks, where all of the songs have been collected together or recorded specifically for the album, are included, where two or more albums have the same sales. Total, they are arranged by dates of release, with the most recent album released ranking the highest. Since its sales are stronger relative to time spent on the market, each entry is occupied by essential information. It's enabling the reader to make sense of the album's wider context in musical and cultural terms. Sorry, my chair's squeaky. Yeah, it's pretty loud. Now let's get into the point with the top sellers of this podcast. So, predictable 9 of the top 20 albums of the 60s are by the Beatles, while rocking giants Led Zeppelin dominated the 1970s. See, you can see my parents are downstairs. I don't know if you heard that, but the 1980s features a wide range of artists and genres, from pop soul divas such as Whitney Houston through to monsters of heavy metal scenes such as Metallica. Now, as the 90s entries show how much country music took a hold of the U.S. music market, thanks to Garth Brooks' creative output and Cheyenne Twain's blend of country and pop, while the boy band pop phenomenon is represented by the Backstreet Boys, their excess, and the rivals of NSYNC continued over into the new millennium, a decade so far largely dominated by R&B and hip-hop and rap. So it was these entries that provided its clear evidence of the dominance in recent years of U.S. artists on their own turf, whereas the 1960s-70s saw UK acts holding the top best-selling slots. Now, it is America's talent that holds the sway in the 80s, 90s, and beyond. For example, Cheyenne Twain, which is another artist. Album Came On Over was the bestseller of the 1990s, having sold a whopping 22 million copies. It ain't really big. I don't know why I said whopping, but 22 million copies is still a lot. So yeah, hold on. Sorry about that, guys. Hold on. I'll be back. Sorry about that, guys. Sorry about that. I had to take a little break real quick. So, yeah. So now let's get into the best-selling albums of the 1950s, which is the podcast I am starting today. Now, the album charts of the early 1950s represent the last phase. It's of popular music before rock and roll took over. So this is a genre before, everything just went over. Now these days it's rap. So it's one's perspective that the range of this music, from Rodgers and Hammerstein to Frank Sinatra, from Mantovani to Mitch Miller, I don't know how to say his name, it is the sound of a lost era. From another, it is a reminder of a time when popular music was in fancy and only just developing in terms of artists, formats, and markets. This music made for new albums market in the 1950s was altogether different from the produced for the singles market. Now, as far as record companies were concerned, singles weren't predominantly for teenagers and children. They also catered to the taste of less well-off adults. Black music and country music were both predominantly released on singles. The album charts during the 1950s represented the taste of the more wealthy section of the American public. So this was partly based on simple economics. But the albums cost more than $2 to buy. So yeah, this is when albums were really cheap. Today, these days, they want like $50 for an album, which is insane, but singles under $1. But it's also a legacy of earlier decades in which longer classical works had needed to be released as albums. As a result, 1950 albums charts overwhelmingly reflected the taste of older, more conservative record buyers. Even a cursory glance. Sorry about that. I'm just moving my chair because I gotta adjust. At the best-selling albums of the 1950s confirms with the striking expectations of Elvis Presley, and Miles Davis. Sorry, I keep on looking at the recorder. It keeps on lighting red. I don't know what that means. Whatever. If this records, it records. I don't know. I might have to postpone it. I don't know. It depends. I've never done a podcast. This is my podcast in a while. It's been like 4 months since I did my last podcast. So, uh, now, even a cursory glance at the best-selling albums of the 1950s confirms with the striking expectations of Elvis Presley, which was a big name back then, and Miles Davis, which was another big name, that this is not a list of musical innovators. Instead, it points to the fact that the top-selling music of period is not always what it's best remembered by poetry or discussed by critics. The popular image we now have of the 1950s rock and roll, jazz, and James Dean actually represents aspects of the culture. Now, that at the time, were the expectations, if you want to know why James Dean became a rebel without a cause, you just need to look at the album charts. It's the reason why rock and roll was such a sensation because, to put it plain and simple, it's because Mom and Pop were busy listening to Manuel Fani, Johnny Mathis, Ray Coffin, and Tennessee's Ernie Ford, which is really interesting. Because I live in Tennessee. I live in Clarksville. Yeah, if you catch up my video from Nintharga 918, a tornado hit here the other day, and it wasn't fun. But yeah, another parental favorite of the 1950 album buyers were the soundtracks to stage and movie musicals. Now, the stage musical may have been coming towards the end of the golden age in the 1950s, but you never have thought so at the time. Now, the popularity of the musical is certainly reflected in the list of the decade's best-selling albums. Yeah, I have my computer pulled up. I can necessarily say I'm kind of cheating at this podcast, because I don't know every single one. But for this top one, I'm only doing top 10 50s albums, and the next one's going to be top 10 60 albums, so I got my computer pulled up here, so I'm kind of cheating, but I'll let you know if some of them are on computer. They're on the list, so I'm just gonna put it plain and simple. But yeah, now I don't know if I never thought so at the time. The popularity of this musical certainly reflected. It's in the list of the decade's best-selling albums. It was with the Broadway production of My Fair Lady and the movie version of Oklahoma, both appearing in the top 10, which I've seen both those movies, and they're great. Now, the 1950 album charts then were not the sound of Teenage Rebellion. They were the sound of middle American kicking back after the trauma of World War II, and enjoying a new era of prosperity. Now, the 1950s did see a number of revolutionary developments that would transform the recording industry and popular culture forever. Now, the new sounds of rock and roll were starting to emerge into the mainstream, you can necessarily say, and the technological advances of the era began to reveal what recorded music was capable of. But this was also a time when most album buyers prized the familiar over the radical rock and roll. Now, I may not have been surprised at single charts, but for most listeners, it was the enchanting show scores. Now, the pop standards and the easy listening favorites that truly defined the sound of the decade. Sorry about that. I had to pause the game, my cat. But my last time pausing, though, I promise. I might pause this again later if I have to go to the bathroom or attend some chores. There's still some chores I haven't done. So yeah. But with that being said, let's go ahead and move to the first list. So number 10 coming in at the 1950s is The Music Man. Now the album sales for this one is $100 million. $100 million. The release date, I think, was January 1958, I think. The release date is, look it up on Google, I don't really know. I might have got it right, I don't know. But now, The Music Man opened at the Majestic Theater. It was in New York in December 1957, and ran, I can't believe this is like the most best performance. Normally, performance these days only hold 200, but you might not think how many performances this person did. You might think 79, you might think 80. No. You might even think 12. No. He did a whopping 1,300 and 79 performances, which I think is insane. Now, it was establishing its composer, Meredith Willson, as one of the leading figures of American musical theater, you can necessarily say. Now, the cast recording of the show became one of the biggest selling albums of the decade, and several of the songs, including 76 Trombones and Till There Was You, became all-time classics. And I mean all-time, became all-time classics. Now, the story of Music Man told of a small Iowa community who clubbed together to create a marching band for their children. Now, the characters in the setting were drawn from Wilson Owen's Midwestern boyhood, and events took place in around 1912. Now, it was the part of Harold Hale, a con man who arrives in, you should say, town. It is converted into a dissent law-abiding citizens, was memorably played by Robert Preston. Now, whose songs feature rapid fire, the perspective effects, the more romantic songs were sung by Barbara Cook. She was a person who played Marion, I think. It was a librarian that Hale falls in love with. It was pretty interesting. I've never really seen the movie all the way through because they did make the movie, but now Cook's singing in the show became one of the highlights of the album. Now, the duet Till There Was You lived on notably with the Beatles' cover version of the 1963 album. The Beatles, now, covers are really rare back then, but yeah, people back then also did covers. Now, these days, not to make fun of your artists, but today's artists aren't really creative when it comes to that. Now, the number one singles it hit was None. And now this is all the information that I searched up because, now, Grammy Awards, you should say, it was the best original cast album, Broadway or TV. Now, the labels with US and UK Capital, which is really rare, you broadly say that, and it was recorded in New York, USA. Now, there's a lot of personnel. There's Barbara Cook, Robert Preston, Eddie Hodges, Park Kilton, Herbert Green, Dick Jones, I gotta take a breath, Vern Reed, Powell Reed, Buffalo Bills, Neil Rice, Peggy Mondo, Aline Swan, Adam Hodges, Iggy Wolfington Assemble, Bob Nolan Orchestra produced NA, which is insane. Now, I ain't gonna go over all the songs, but one Over to Rock Islands, which was 5 minutes 29 seconds, was my favorite song. 76 Trumbones was also my favorite. My White Knight was also my favorite. Now, the total album length was 44 minutes because it has 17 songs. But the reason why you might be thinking, why 44 minutes? There's 17 songs, and that's because songs back then were short. They only topped like 1 or 2 minutes max. So, that was Music Man. Let's go ahead and go straight to the next one. Alright, so now for this next one. Oh crap, I hit the microphone. Oops, that's okay. I'm gonna bleep that out. So in the 1950s, okay, so now it's coming in at the 9th spot. Make fun of me. I don't know how to say this name. Is it Hyms or Hymens? It's spelled Hymns. I don't know how to say it. So this one I'm kind of gonna be on, but that's okay. The album sales for this one is 100 million. Now, I might be thinking 100 million albums, that's not really successful. Back then, it was successful. Today, people might not think that's successful because now these days, albums have to sell like 20 million, if not 50 million copies. But back then, it was only even a few thousand copies was good. An artist could sell 2.1 thousand, they'll be happy with it. Now, I know the exact date for this one. This one was 1957. Now, it was in the spring of 1957, and Tennessee Ernie Ford was in the midst of transforming himself from a country to a western singer, which is really rare because you'll hardly see singers transition different genres. Now, it's best known for his chart-topping single, 16 Tons. It was into an all-around entertainer and a TV representer, known for his catchphrase, "Bless your little pea-picking hearts." Which is really weird. I don't know why. That's probably not a line I would say. It's weird. But it's his TV show that Ford has a debut on NBC. It's in the fall of 1956, and by the end of its first season, was number one in their ratings. Now, Ford has fought with TV executives to be allowed to finish in each show with a spiritual member. Now, it's to the producers, you can necessarily say, that surprised this turned out to be one of the most successful sections of the show. Now, music back then were mainly into shows and Broadway performances than it is streaming services, because back then people had a lot of class. They didn't have streaming services and stuff, so it was very classical back then. Um, so, in response to the huge popular demand, Ford decided to make his next album exclusively devotional and famous numbers like Rock of Ages and the Old Rugged Cross, along with lesser known selections, what am I saying? Rugged Cross, along with lesser known selections such as In the Garden. The material was ideally suited to Ford's powerful voice, and it quickly became the biggest hit album of his career. Now, Hymns was the first religious album to go gold. It remained on the charts for an unprecedented 277 weeks, which is insane, breaking all records and eventually selling over 1 million copies. Now, it was in 1963, Hymns was honored by Capitol as being the most successful LP ever recorded by a Capitol artist. His subsequent album, Graded Gospel Songs, won a Grammy Award in 1964. And it was recorded by a Capitol artist. Now, his subsequent album, Great Gospel Songs, won a Grammy Award in 1964. So, number one singles, none. It won no Grammy Awards, which is sad, because his album's good. Recorded in Los Angeles, USA, and label US Capitol. Personnel, Tennessee, Ernie Ford. He died in 1991, so rest in peace to him. And Jack Fasnito. Now, the album length is 33 minutes. I have one song, is Ivory Places. It's my Palace. I don't know why I said places. Ivory Palace is the only song I like by his. But that was, now, TV in the 1950s, during the 1950s, television became a force which musician groups and managers could no longer ignore. Now, in the United States, television sets began to spread during the 1930s with 31,000 sets, which was insane. In the U.S., as in early of 1931. However, in the late 1940s and early 1950s, a dramatic increase in the number of broadcast companies, a relative cheapening of set technology, because this is back, like I said, back in the 1950s, so not that much people really did anything, and the easily evaluated of loan agreements resulted in 3 million sets sold by 1955, and 75% of U.S. homes had a set by the following year. The typical American family would watch an average of, sorry about that, I just belched, of 5 hours of programming each day, with light entertainment programs, dramas, musicals, comedies, and westerns medium to project themselves visually into almost every U.S. home. So yeah, so half of these songs in the 1950s aired on shows and televisions, because back then musical and stage performances were popular back then. So yeah, like I said, this is both for streaming. And that's why in the 1950s, movie musicals really hit its peak. But yeah, let's go ahead and get straight into, now it was pretty amazing, but yeah. So the next artist, unlike Himes, however you spell it, if you're not in the mood of Himes, then you sure are in the mood for the next person on this list in the 1950s. Is coming in at the number 8 spot is Love Is a Thing. Now, this one, I don't want to hate on anybody, but I had not listened to this album. I searched this one up because this was the only one I didn't know, so I pulled this one up on my computer. Yeah, be angry at me, but now the album sales for this one is 100 million, and it was released date in 1957, so I think it was the same year Tennessee Ford, I think, released this song. I don't know, I have a memory as an ant, but now Nat King Cole, which is the singer for this album, Love is a thing. Now, Nat King Cole was really popular in the 1950s. He hit his peak through the 50s and some of the 60s. I don't think he made it to the 60s. Now, now it was a million. Now, a million seller for Capitol Records on its release in 1957, which is insane. Now, among its many hit songs was Stardust was one of them, which had been issued in EP format earlier in the year. Now, the composer Hoagie Carmichael, I think that's how you say it. Why is his name Hoagie? Hackalogie? It's weird, but sorry, my goofball attitude. It said it was the favorite version of the song. Now it's reviving as it did the original introduction to the verse, and it became one of America's best loved songs. Now, throughout the album, arranger Gordon Jenkins provided a lush orchestral backdrop, which is insane. His backdrops are really rare. And now it's too cool, understanding yet carefully energical vocals. Now, the result was to create a romantic mood that rendered Cole limited vocal range irrelevant, as Cole himself put it. I leaned heavily on lyrics. I tried to tell a story with the melody as the background. Because singers these days don't really sing it. There's just a bunch of cursing. Now, back in the 1950s was feel-good music, like inspiration music. It's not like all the rap and dirty songs you hear these days. But it was the combination of Jenkins. Now, the swooning strings and Cole's relaxed urban singing style gave it a classic vibe to the feel-good track on the album type thing. Now, including the most sentimental ballads and the most hackneyed jazz standards. Now the success of Love Is a Thing helped to establish Cole not just as a sepia Sinatra, I think that's how you say, Sepia Sinatra, I don't know, but also as leading ballad singer of this time. Now, during a period when race was still considered by record companies to be a major obstacle to mainstream sales potential. Like I said, the album says 100 million. It was 1957. Now, number one singles didn't chart any, sadly. The Grammy Awards, it won none. Sorry, I keep on moving around my chair. Sorry if you hear some background music. Not background noise. My microphone bleeps background noise, I think. I don't know, this is a new microphone. I haven't used it a lot, but it was labeled in US and UK Capital. It was recorded in NA. Personnel Nat King Cole. Sadly, he died in 1965. Rest in peace to him. Gordon Jenkins and his orchestra and producer. And now the album charts top to 40 minutes, and he has like 13 songs. I haven't heard any of the songs on this album, so yeah, make fun of me. I don't listen to every 50 singer, but at least I still listen to 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s, and the 2000s. I still get into this modern music, but not as much, because every modern music these days is rap. You should keep crying of Single Night. Actually, that song I like. Don't make fun of XXX and Tashawn. It's pretty cool, but yeah, this is back in this things. And now, in the 1950s, I gotta give credit to 1950s. This is when African Americans in 1950s music. This is African Americans in 1950s music. Because back then, African Americans really hit it big when it came to radios. Now, the most war period saw the increasing influence of African American musicians on pop world music, jazz, and swing were already established. Now, the movements by the beginning of the 1950s by the driving force of black music during the decade was rhythm and blues, because now rhythm and blues style was popular primarily in African American creation of the 1940s. Now, indeed, the term was coined in 1949 by Jerry Wexler, later of Atlantic Records. So he formed Atlantic Records in 1950, which is insane because I even know Atlantic Records existed that long. I thought it was formed in the 80s, but proves I'm wrong. And was influential, used to distinguish black rock and roll from the played by white musicians. The African American roots to have a formative input on the music of white artists such as Elvis Presley and the Beatles. Now, black music provided a solid danceable beat, and with racial segregation, now it was illegal in the US from the 1940s, it could filter more freely out into the wider society. But, I mean, hey, there's other artists on this list, so just bear with us here. We're almost done. Well, when I mean almost done, we're halfway through this podcast. Now, if you're not into the Nat King Cole look, that's okay. There's other songs on this list, but coming in at the number 7th spot is Heavenly by Johnny Mathis. I've listened to 3 songs by his. He was also really popular in the 50s. Not only are these albums, but these are singers that really hit it big in the 1950s. So I'm just gonna let you guys know now. But one of his successful albums coming at the number 7 spot in the 1950s was Heavenly. Now the album sales topped 200 million, which is insane. It was release date August 1959. Like I said, these are albums back in the 50s where they only had to sell few thousand copies, and they would be big. Everybody would know them. So it was really easy to break in the music industry back then. I don't know about today's standards. I don't know because I'm not a singer or songwriter, nor am I an artist, but that's okay. But it was released in 1959, August of 1959. So it was my birthday month because I was born on August 30th. That's all I'm going to tell you because I ain't giving away my personal information. But Heavenly was Johnny Mathis' 10th album in just 3 years. So imagine pushing out 3 albums each year. It's really, really amazing. Like, these days, artists skip a few years and go to the next album, but Mathis was just pushing out albums left and right. Now, the most successful of the standard album releases, his sales were exceeded only by his 1958 Merry Christmas album and later complexion of his greatest hits. Now, Heavenly didn't succeed by doing anything particularly innovative, but simply put it this way, by giving the public exactly what they had come to expect from Mathis, by now an established star. Now, that meant a selection of show tones and some standards and a smattering of new material, all delivered in the utterly relaxed Mathis Keener. The title track was an early composition from the writing team of Burt Bacharach. People had weird names back then. Sorry. Now these days people are named John, Mark, Lucas. People had weird names. When I mean weird, they had like utterly names like Swooshuwas. I just named that up. Make fun of me. I'm stupid. Okay. I'm not stupid though. I don't know. I don't know. And there was also Hal David, another successful track, was the vocal version of Errol Garner's jazz classic. Now, Misty, to which Mathis had added new lyrics by Joe Burke. Misty went on to become Johnny Mathis' first single in 2 years. Can you believe that? 2 years. Now, Heavenly may have been more of the same as far as critics were concerned, but with this album, Mathis appeared to have got the balance just right. Now, the public responded with great enthusiasm, and Mathis was rewarded with 5 weeks at number 1. It went on to spend a remarkable 5.5 years in the charts, which is just insane. Imagine 5.5 years. I cannot believe that. So the number 1 singles hit none. Grammy Awards, none. Yeah, Grammy Awards were really rare back then. You had to be like a skilled artist to have a Grammy Award. Now these days, a new artist can be, and they'd only have like 1.5 million listeners, and their most popular song would have 12 million streams, and then they already get a Grammy. It's insane. Now these days, it's easy to get a Grammy, but back then it was not. Now, label U.S. Columbia UK Ambassador recorded in New York, USA. Now the personnel, Johnny Mathis, he's still going. I'm amazed he's still going. Now, the producer, Mitch Miller. He is one of the producers. Now, Mathis's later career, this was when I didn't make up, so sorry if I fumble, but I'm going to try to recap this short and simple. Johnny Mathis had one of the most durable careers in the music industry. Although his popularity peaked during the 1950s and 1960s, during which time he established himself as a solid album artist, he maintained his career into the 1950s by moving into more pop rock oriented numbers. The duet single Too Much Too Little Too Late brought Mathis a number 1 in 1978. Now the second of his career, after which duets with major female artists such as Dionne Warwick, Gladys Knight, and Natalia Cole brought him further respectable success, even through the 1990s. Now, Mathis was recorded, releasing and selling albums, and received a Grammy in 1992 for Best Traditional Pop Performance. Now, I've only listened to 3 songs. Heavenly was one of them. Ride on a Rainbow, that was one of them, and They Say It's Wonderful was only 3 songs I've listened to. The song total album length was 48 minutes with 12 songs. It's like I said, songs back then were short. Today's music is short too. You hardly see music these days top 2 minutes max, and it's silly. So yeah, with that being said, if there's other artists, like I said, so if Johnny Mathis ain't a kick, well, I'm sure this next artist is for you. Now, when I'm doing this podcast, you might think, wait a minute, you're advertising for these other singers and songwriters. I am not. Don't tell me I'm not. And I ain't forcing you to listen to these. Reason I'm saying, ooh, well, if this one's not for you, then sure, next one's for you. I ain't forcing you guys. You can listen to what you listen to. You can listen to your modern music. I ain't gonna bug you on that. I don't hate modern music. It's just that modern music's really hard to get to. But different people have different meanings. Oh, God. I think I might have to pause again. I gotta go get some water. My throat's kind of getting dry. So now, hold on. I'm gonna go get a drink of water. I'll be back. Sorry about that, guys. I'm back. Hold on. Sorry about that. I had to get a drink. I'm way too thirsty. My mouth's getting dry from all this talking. Don't worry, I'm gonna push it through. I don't know how long this podcast is. It's probably gonna top in the hour long because each segment's like 4 minutes. So yeah, consider that a little ASMR for you guys. I'm already putting in a little bit of ASMR with the chair crackling and this water going. So if you hear any ASMR noises, just make sure it's probably me. Like I said, I also have ADHD, so it's probably me tapping or rocking in this chair drinking water because my mouth is dry. All right, so now coming in at the 6th spot with the 1950s, which is a mouthful of an album title, Gunfighter, Ballads, and Trial Songs. Yeah, it's a mouthful for an album. Normally, albums these days only have 1 word, but this one had 5 words. 5 words, imagine 5 words. Now, the album series for this one's 200 million, so it's the same thing as the last one I was just talking about. Now, the release date was September 1959. Now, Marty Robbins, which was the guy who sang the album, was a singer for this album, had a reputation for versatility in 1959. He had recorded straight country, smooth pop novelty songs, and even some gentle rock and roll, which is also really rare. But when it cuts, sorry, I'm adjusting the microphone. But when it comes to classical album and Western songs, he surprised everyone. When I mean surprised everyone, he surprised everyone. The cowboy song had its heyday years before, when the likes of Gene Autry, which was one of the other popular singers at the time, had ruled the airwaves and was generally seen as hopeless, out of date. Now, Robbins nursed a secret passion for this music. However, had quietly composed, you should necessarily say, a whole set of cowboy songs of his own. So yeah, he did half of them on his own, which was amazing. Now, one afternoon in Nashville, of course, Nashville's a music country, so half these 1950 songs were recorded in Nashville. Nashville's still strong to this day. It's getting bigger. I can't believe how big Nashville's getting. But he went into the studio. And recorded. Oh, sorry about that. I'm belching. Look, I just had dinner a few minutes ago, so sorry if I'm belching. I belched again. For everybody's doing it, so you can laugh about it. You can be mature. You can do whatever you want. I'm sorry. I'm passing gas right now. Okay, but he went into the studio and recorded them all. Now, he aided and abetted by his backup singers. He later starts in their own right, Brother Jim and Tom Glaser. Now, the result was that this side project became by far the biggest selling album of Robbins. Why did I make that noise? That was weird. Why did I make that noise? My throat did that. I don't know why. I don't know why I made that noise. That was weird. I know I can do that. I'm not going to do it again, though. But I'm getting off track. Back to the podcast again. Like I said, I have ADHD. Sorry if I stick in a few side conversations there. I'm sorry about that. I think I have ADHD. I don't know. I think we all have ADHD. I haven't been tested by it. I don't know. It's crazy. And now the result was the side project became by far the biggest selling album of Robin's career. It's phenomenal. Now, the success began with the release of singles El Paso, which I listened to. Despite being 4.5 minutes in length, it was an immediate hit. Like, as soon as he put it up on record labels, it was an immediate hit. Now, it was reaching number 1 on both pop and country charts. The album soon followed suit and went on to becoming the definitive cowboy album. Now, the oral equivalent of the classic TV series of the era, Bonanza or Gunsmoke, Robbins won a Grammy for Best Country and Western Performance of El Paso in 1960. So he recorded El Paso, and El Paso actually liked it, which is really weird. Somebody singing about their own state and the state likes it, it's pretty rare. But he sang El Paso, and El Paso people liked it, so I ain't gonna mind that. Now, in the 1950s TV Western, so back then in the 1950s, some of other popular music back then was Westerns. Westerns was really big. I ain't really big on Westerns. I know, make fun of me. But as television became a more cultural, entrenched phenomenon in the 1950s, because back then not a lot of people owned TVs, because back then TVs were hundreds and thousands of dollars. Because this is when TVs really started hitting big. Because, I mean, TVs were created in the 1930s. So TVs were starting to become a thing. Now, program producers sought dependable formulas to entertain the new mass audience. I've seen a few 50s TVs back then. They're awesome, like Gunsmoke and all that. I pay respect to them. Those were awesome. Now, the Western genre was ideal, combining strongman, beautiful woman, cute, beautiful woman, action, and often song. Movie theater Westerns initially declined in number owing to competitive programming. Now, on TV shows such as The Kisiko Kid, 1950 to 1956, The Lone Ranger, 1949 and 1957, and The Roy Rogers Show, 1957. I've seen The Lone Ranger before. It's really good. I'm not really big. But, however, Hollywood fought back with intelligent character study movies such as Gunfighter, which was one I just mentioned, 1950, starring Gregory Peck and Fred Zin's High Moon, 1952, which is insane, and also with epic widescreen spectaculars, including William Wyler's The Big Country in 1958. We have that a movie on DVD. I know, I live with parents, they're Gen X. We own DVDs and CDs. I'm not like you guys, Gen Zs. Of course, I'm making fun of my own generation. I'm born in Gen Z. I like Gen Z. But I'm sticking with my DVDs and CDs because my parents raised me right. But an updated Western Bad Day in Black Rock with Spencer Tracy's as the famous one-armed hero. Now, number 1 singles, U.S. El Paso was one of them. Grammy Awards Best Country and Western Performances in El Paso. And labeled U.S. Columbia, UK, and CBS, and it was recorded in Nashville, USA, because like I said, half the songs in 1950 were recorded in Nashville, which is pretty weird, because, I mean, Nashville is a music state, so that's where Nashville gets all the cool. Nashville mainly does country. But the personnel was Marty Robbins, the lead singer, Thomas Grady Martin, Jack H. Pritt, Bob Moore, Louis Dunn, Jim Glaser, Tom Pell Glaser, and producer was Don Law. I listened to one song. They Are Hanging Me Tonight. Yeah, sounds like a gruesome song. That's the only song I listened to. It's a good song, though. Now, the album length was 35 minutes with 12 songs. Because all the songs chopped out of like 2 minutes in length, so it wasn't really long, but there's still 3 minutes. There's few songs that were 3 minutes and 4 minutes, but that's as far as you can go. So yeah, that was good. Now let's move on to the next on this list. We're halfway through the podcast. This is about the longest podcast I've ever did. So Yeah. So coming in at number 5th spot is Merry Christmas. Now this is a Christmas album. That was another thing. Now these newer Christmas songs aren't really popular, but half the Christmas songs you hear today, like Jingle Bell Rock and all that stuff, was in the 1950s. Because back then in the 1950s, Christmas music really hit its peak. That's why even today people still listen to classic 1950s music as a Christmas tradition. Which I'm saying this because this is airing in December and this is Christmas month. So yeah. So now, this song, Merry Christmas, which is plain and simple, it's self-named Merry Christmas, but the album sales for this one is 200 million units. So all the stuff I'm talking about are basically the same units. 102 million is like the max when it comes to selling in the 1950s. And now the release date was 1958, believe it or not. And these are all released the same year too, which is funny. Now, over a 50-year career in the music business, Johnny Mathis, which was a guy I've already brought up earlier, hit it big once again. So he got two numbers in this list. Recorded an extraordinary 9 Christmas albums, which is amazing. He must have loved Christmas because he sang the 9 Christmas albums. But his first venture into season recording remains the best loved at the time of the recording. Mathis was loved. Sorry about that, I'm really stuffy, so I'm snorkeling. Now, I know it's winter. It's cold season, so make fun of me if I cough or something, but it doesn't matter. I don't think I'm gonna cough. I'm just gonna be a lot because my nose is stuffy. I'm sick, okay? Remains the best loved at the time of the recording. Mathis was loved at the time of the recording. Mathis was aged 23 at the time. He was very young back then, and it's sad that he died at a very young age. That was the hottest young corner in the business. He had just made his film debut. Now, he was appearing... Sorry about the gaps. I'm breathing. Now, he was appearing as a nightclub singer at a Christmas album. It was an obvious next move for Mathis, so this is new to him. For the album, he was paired up with the lead Percy Faith and his orchestra. Now, the material they chose was mostly Ortra of the tired and testy variety, Bing Crosby's White Christmas. Is Nat King Cole's signature Christmas song. However, Mathis managed to find a signature tune of his own as well with the opening Winter Wonderland. The result was an album that has occasionally sold over more than 40 years to this point. 40 million years. The song hasn't been around that long. To the point where for many Americans, it's an integral part of Christmas experience. As Oprah Winfrey, he said, if you don't have Johnny Mathis, you don't have Christmas, which I respect that line a lot. Without Johnny Mathis, you don't have Christmas, that's sure, because even today we listen to half of Johnny Mathis' Christmas songs. While Mathis himself jokes that the only thing I'm not so fond of at Christmas is hearing myself so much. Yeah, he got annoyed by his music for hearing his songs everywhere, but that's what he gets for recording 9 Christmas musics. I ain't saying that is bad. I love his Christmas albums, so I ain't making fun of him at all. Now, the number 1 singles, he got none. Grammy Awards, he got none. Label US, Columbia and CBS, UK, Fontana recorded. We don't know about that, but his personnel was the lead singer, Johnny Mathis, and the Percy Faith Orchestra. It was produced by Percy Faith, which was a popular orchestra people back then. My throat's getting dry again. Total album length was 44 minutes. I know multiple songs. I ain't gonna go through all this because 90% of the songs I know. He has 12 songs: Winter Wonderland, Christmas Song, Sleigh Ride, Blue Christmas, I'll Be Home for Christmas, White Christmas, Oh Holy Night, What Child Is This, First Noel, Silver Bells, That Came Upon a Midnight Star, and Silent Night are all songs I love. So expect this to be the first Christmas album on this list since this is Christmas month. So yeah. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one if Johnny Mathis ain't really a thing for you guys. Like I said, I ain't saying this as you guys hate it. I'm not forcing you guys to listen to. I'm just saying that if you guys do listen to it, it's great. You guys can do whatever you want because it's just my opinion. But I'm just saying the best-selling albums, and I'm just starting off the 1950s. So, yeah. Alright, hold on. I gotta get another drinky here. I'm sorry about drinking so much, guys. I can't help it. And that's okay. So coming in at the number 4 spot in the 1950s is Oklahoma, which is amazing. Now the album sales is 200 million. 2 million. It was, the release date was August 1955, so we got a new release date now, thank God. Half the albums were released the same years. So Oklahoma, the movie, arrived 12 years after the opening of the Broadway show, based on the Green Grow the Lilacs. Now, the public were still impressed by Rodgers and Hammerstein's first work together, and what became a landmark musical. The occupying soundtrack to the movie sold 200 million copies, and it was composer Richard Rodgers and lyric Oscar Hammerstein had a remarkable degree of control over the film's version. Now you might be thinking, Hammerstein, that's not that kind of Hammerstein. You know, I'm not talking about the rock Hammerstein, I'm talking about the original Hammerstein back in the 1950s. He had a remarkable degree of control over the film's version, ensuring that Hollywood remained faithful to the original work. Only 2 of the original songs, Lonely Room and It's a Scandal, It's an Outrage, were missing from the 2.5-hour movie, and Jake Blackton continued to conduct, sorry about the stuttering, the orchestra constructs of arranged Robert Russell Bennett were recorded in the stereo. Now, it was opposite to the mono recording of the Broadway cast album, giving it the lush musical. Now, arrangements as British Independent that was continued to impress listeners, complaining that the sweeping orchestras were the voices of the cast often chose as much for their vocal talent as far as the box office polls as movie stars. Gordon McRae took the male lead role, while 20-year-old Shirley Jones played the female lead. Gloria Graham took the role of Annie. Their confident singing added warmth, intimacy, and character to the lavish production. Mouthful. Now, Rodgers and Hammerstein, the surnames of Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein came to be synonymous with the stage and film musicals in the 1950s. The 2 men began collaborating on musical production in the 1940s. Now, Rodgers, having previously worked with LucasArts, Rodgers and Hammerstein's first musical was a blockbuster, Oklahoma. I've seen that movie. It's really good. I like it. 1943. It's 2.5 hours. It's super long because movies back in the 50s were long as hell. So it was 2 hours long. I don't know if that was cursing. Sorry. I don't really like cursing. I don't curse a lot. Oklahoma, 1943. The musical was groundbreaking because it had a substantial plot and characterization, rather than being simply a vehicle for enjoyable songs, you can necessarily say. This formula enabled the 2 men to set the pace for musicals over the next decade, with stage productions including Carousel 1945, South Pacific 1949, The King and I 1951, The Sound of Music 1959. The partnership ended with Hammerstein's death from cancer in 1959. So he didn't live a long life, so rest in peace. So he died not long after this movie was released. It's one of those segments where actors don't see their final product because they're gone. So number 1 singles, 1 none. Grammy Awards, none. So all this list, mainly all the artists in this list did not win any. I don't even know if Grammys even existed at this point. I don't know. I don't know how long Grammys have been around. Labeled US and UK MCA Capital. It was recorded in, we don't know about that. And personnel was Shirley Jones. Be prepared for a whole buttload of list. Gordon McRae, Gloria Graham, Rod Steiger, Charlotte Greenwood, Gene Nielsen, James Whitemore, Jay Blackton, and Robert Russell Bennett. Alright, sorry guys. I moved a little. I'm sorry if you hear an echo. I moved because I was getting a little bit too warm upstairs. So I'm down here. Charlotte Green. So the producer was Ron O'Brien, which was one of them. He produced and actually directed this movie too, which was nice. Now, the overture, I've listened to a few songs, 3 songs. Kansas City was one of them. I Can't Say No was one of them. And then Many a New Day was another one I've listened to. And the total round length was 42 minutes. So yeah, let's go on to the next list. We don't know if it's going to be a song from that, but let's go on to the next list. So coming in at the number 3 spot, don't worry, we're almost done. We're halfway through this podcast, so stick with me here. So, My Fair Lady coming in at the number 3rd spot for the 1950s was My Fair Lady. Now, the album sales was 300 million. So, I finally got a new number now, which is great because now this is to the point where the numbers start getting higher and higher. So, we only got 3 more slots to us. Now, the release date was March 1956. Now, this recording of Lerner and Loewe's My Fair Lady was performed by the original stage cast, and on its release in 1956, topped the Billboard charts for 292 weeks. A record that to this day has not been broken, which is insane. The stage musical had been a huge success, running for 2,700 performances. I don't know what I'm saying. So this is a new number. It was considered superior to the average Broadway show based on George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion. Alan J. Lerner's lyrics retain much of Shaw's wit and sparkle, while Frederick Lowe's song ranged from the romantic "I could have danced all night" and "On the street where you live." Now, to the humorous, "The rain is paying, get me to the church on time." Few musicals, you can say, can boast as many classic numbers. The original cast featured 22-year-old Julie Andrews, Elizabeth Doolittle on top vocal form, Rex Harrison, and perfecting his urban talk singing style, and Stanley Holloway offered P. Doolittle, adding a touch of English musical hall comedy to the proceedings. Not surprisingly, Broadway fans considered this original mono recording of the stage musical to be fresher than the technically polished recorded in the 1964 film, in which Audrey Hepburn played Eliza with vocals dubbed by Morton Nixie. Non number 1 singles, none. Grammy Awards, we actually won one, which was nice. This is the first one on this list that actually won a Grammy. There hasn't been anything on this list that hasn't won a Grammy yet, but this one. So yeah, we finally got a Grammy in, which is nice. Now, label US Columbia, UK Philips. It was recorded in London, UK, and the personnel was Julie Andrews, Rex Harrison, who died in 1990. Rest in peace to him. He was good. He was the guy who sang this album. Stanley Holloway, Gordon Dilworth, John Michael King, and Philippa Davis. Producer, drumroll please, Robert Lieberson. Now, musical superstars was really rare back in the 1950s, but the musical dominated their turntable stages and film screens in the 1950s, and the 1950s music charts were frequently topped by show tunes, and the genre made superstars out of figures such as Janelle Kelly, Rex Harrison, Leo Breyer, Ethel Merman, Mary Martin. The last 2 figures from that list performed in a revenue concert Broadway live on television from the Broadway Central Theater on 15th of June 1953. The occasion being the 50th anniversary of the Ford Motor Company, such as was the poll of this event that was watched by 60 million Americans, and the recording of Merman and Martin duet sold 100,000 copies in 2 days, which is amazing. Now, I've listened to one song, You Did It, which was the only song you did it. It's the only song I listened to because you did it. You made me do this album. I'm just kidding. Now, total amount of length 53 minutes, so this is the longest album on here. So yeah. Now let's go on to the next one. The next album is kind of blue. So coming in at the 1950s spot, coming in at the number 2 spot in the 1950s, it's Kind of Blue. Now this album sold 3 million copies. Now, the release date was August 1959. Now, it was recorded in just 2 days, believe it or not. Kind of Blue is not only the best-selling jazz album of all time, but also one of the most influential. It's likely to be the only jazz album that many rock fans have in their collection. And more than 40 years after its release, its reflective sparse style is still considered modern to this day. The recording of Kind of Blue was sandwiched in between 2 of Davis' big band projects, Porgy and Bess, which won a Grammy Award for the Best Soundtrack, and Sketches of Pain. For Kind of Blue, Davis assembled a small combo featuring pianist Bill Evans, whose input here is almost as great as that of Davis himself, and legendary saxophonist John Coltrane and Cannonball, additionally who improvised superbly around the haunting modal themes in the crack rhythm section of Chambers on Cobb. The session were unrehearsed and spontaneous. It was just Jimmy Cobb. Later remarked the resulting recording was made in heaven. Unreleased, the album sold respectively for modern jazz record, but it did enter the mainstream charts. However, with each passing year, its reputation grew to the extent that it now sells at least 5,000 copies a week in the U.S. and has sold more than 500 million copies. 5 million copies worldwide. I don't know why I said 500. I'm mumbling my words. Why am I doing that? So this was also in the 1950s. I just hit the 1 hour mark. Holy crap, I'm getting through this. Okay, so now let's get into the jazz in the 1950s. The 1950s were a troubled time for world jazz. Rock and roll became the dominant force in popular music, and jazz commercial appeal fell away almost entirely as many of big jazz bands broke up. The smaller groups created identical new jazz forms such as improvised West Coast, big jazz West Coast, and smaller groups created new jazz forms such as the professional West Coast Cool School, led by figures such as Gary Milligan, Dave Burdock, and the blues and gospel-oriented hard hop of Art Blakey, Miles Davis, and Harco Silver. Other jazz musicians, however, including Charles Mingus and Jimmy Golfer, explored third stream and experimental fusion of jazz and classical music, which only had a small following. Now, the number one singles, none. Grammy Awards, none. Which is weird because it's coming at the number 2nd spot. Label US Columbia and UK Fontana. Recorded in Columbia 30th Street Studio, New York, USA. Now personnel: Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Julian Cannonball Adderley, Bill Evans, Paul Chambers, Jimmy Cobb, Walton Kelly, producer Ivan Tomstead. The album length was 45 minutes, and this is actually the most shortest album with only 5 songs. So What, Freddie Whirling, Blue and Green, Fleming's Kitchen, and All Blues. I've never listened to any of these songs. Like I said, I only listened to some of these. Alright, drum roll please. The last one. So coming in at the number 1 spot for the 1950s before this podcast ends is Elvis's Christmas album. I knew this was going to be on the list. I knew it was going to be on the list. And this one, we have the biggest number yet. This album sold a whopping 7 million copies worldwide. The release date was October 1957, so it was back to the same date again. Now, this was recorded in 1957, believe it or not. Elvis's first album of Christmas songs helped to establish him the king of light entertainment as well as rock and roll. Despite causing uproar on its release, Irving Berlin, the composer of White Christmas, led a campaign to stop Elvis' version being played on the radio. The album hit number 1 on Billboard chart and continues to sell in large numbers each Christmas until 1962. Since then, it has become a Christmas classic. It is now the best-selling album in the 1950s. The album, along with other material, was recorded in 3 days, which was amazing. It was September 5th to 7th at Raider Recorders in Hollywood. It contained a mixture of hymns, gospel tunes, and secular Christmas songs, all of which Presley handled with characteristic panache during the session. Songwriter, label, and solo wrote the opening. Now, track Santa Claus is Back in Town, which became one of the collection's highlights. On its release in October, media pundits, churchmen, and music industry figures, knowing nothing of Presley's southern gospel roots, denounced it as an attempt by the young rock and roll rebel to profane Christianity. The public felt differently, however, and the album's previously heartfelt religious spirit had helped confirm Presley's status as an all-American folk hero. The Elvis controversy. Yes, Elvis did hit controversies back then. He sounded good, but he did hit some controversies. Now, Elvis is now so integral to the history of mainstream rock and roll, and it is hard to imagine that controversy his act initially created. He was proactive, when I mean proactive both musically and physically, being a white man playing music embedded to African American culture and having an electrifying style of dance, which earned him the nickname Elvis the Pelvis, which is weird. He abdominal grandson on the Milton Berkeley show in 1956. Elvis the Pelvis is probably a name they gave him to make fun of him because, like I said, he was in controversy a lot, particularly to the track Hound Dog. It lubricated a huge audience, but also accused of lewdness. Ed Sullivan, then America's most influential chat show host, said he would never have Elvis on a show. but relentlessly 3 times owing to Elvis' enormous popularity on Elvis' final performance on the show in January 1957. The cameras filmed Elvis only for the waist up to avoid any scandal, but this simply added the snowballing publicity around the performer. Number 1 singles, it hit none. Grammy Awards, it hit none, which is weird. It's his most popular song. Label US and UK RCA. It recorded in Hollywood, USA. Personnel Elvis Presley, he dead now, 1977. 1977, rest peace to him. He had a heart attack, sadly. Scotty Moore, Bill Black, DJ Fontana of The Journeys, Billy Cunningham, and producer Steve Schultz. This album length tops in 30 minutes because all songs are short. Now, I've listened to some of these. White Christmas is one of them. I'll Be Home for Christmas, Blue Christmas, one of them. And the rest of us are covers out y'all listen to. But with that being said, that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Like I said, this is my first podcast in a while, and this is my first podcast not talking about video game based, but this is a song related one, a music related one, but that was necessarily it. I'll be posting this on my main YouTube channel, and I'll be posting this on my second YouTube channel. I'm not going to be posting every single podcast on my main YouTube channel. I'm just going to post this one just to let everybody know and just heads up, hey, I'm starting to make podcasts on there. So if you're watching this on my main YouTube channel, just to say I won't be posting a lot on my main YouTube channel when it comes to podcasts, but I will still post shorts and all that stuff. So if you're watching this on my Nintraka 19 YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe to my Sparker Hat 3940. And make sure to subscribe to that. I still had the Nate name. I just rebranded my channel as Sparker Hat 3940 because that's my brand name for the Xbox 360. I know, make fun of me. I have an Xbox 360 thing, but I love Xbox 360. It's no longer can go to that. I'm sad that's going to be shutting down the Xbox 360 store in July. So I gotta start buying games before it goes out. So yeah, I'll get more into that later on. But, so, yeah, thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for the next one, because the next one I'll be talking about albums in the 1960s that hit it big. So, top 10 albums in the 1960s that hit it big. So, stay tuned, because we'll be doing 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and then 2000s all the way to modern day music. Okay? So, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe, because this channel desperately needs some subscribers. You don't have to subscribe if you don't want. Like I said, this is my first podcast, so I'm surprised I made it this far during this podcast. But, yep. I pushed it through, drank some water. Actually, I had to go to the bathroom during this podcast. And it's now 5:10. I started at 3 o'clock. So it's pretty long. I don't know how long this video is going to be posted because, like I said, I got to do all the editing. But my first podcast is not actually terrible. So I hope you guys enjoyed. And I'll see you guys next time. So make sure to like and subscribe. If you don't want to like and subscribe to this channel, I do have my Nintraka 19 YouTube channel on this channel. So make sure to check out my main YouTube channel. I upload shorts of 813 subscribers. I'm getting up there. Like I said, I ain't really trying to hit it big. I just love making content. But with that being said, I'm a human. I got things to do. Still got a little bit of chores to do. Plus, I got to drink some water. And plus, I got to have dessert. Because I actually haven't had dessert yet. And I had dinner like 2 hours ago. Since I started this podcast. It's 1 hour, but 2 hours. But with that being said, I hit the 1 hour mark. I'm happy. With that being said, it's time for me to go. I hope you guys enjoyed it. With that being said, I got some dessert to eat. Bye. I hope you guys enjoy. Now you can leave me alone in peace so I can eat my dessert.